When the doorbell rang, my eyes instinctively turned toward the clock. It was exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Who could be at the door at this hour? I thought to myself with growing curiosity. Instead of opening the door immediately, I moved toward the window and cautiously peeked outside. To my surprise, standing right there on the front step was my 14-year-old brother-in-law. I hadn't seen him in what felt like ages. Ever since I had left my in-laws' house, I had completely cut off all ties with that side of the family. There had been no communication, no calls, no letters, no visits. So, seeing him there, suddenly and without warning, was nothing short of shocking. Questions started flooding my mind. Why had he come? What could have happened? Something felt strange, deeply unsettling, even before I opened the door. He began banging on the door more urgently now, and I quickly hurried to let him in. The heat outside was intense. Summer had reached its peak. As he stepped inside, I noticed immediately that his eyes were red and swollen, like he had been crying for hours. His face was pale, his breathing uneven. My heart sank. "What happened, Zishan? Is everything all right?" I asked, clearly worried. Without saying a word, he suddenly burst into uncontrollable sobs, as if holding it in for too long had made it unbearable. I was caught off guard. My anxiety increased, and 1,000 possibilities flashed through my mind. I instinctively asked about my former mother-in-law and sister-in-law. My mother-in-law had been elderly and unwell even back when I lived there. She had a heart condition and had been bedridden for quite some time. The first dreadful thought that struck me was, did something happen to her? But Zishan didn't say a single word in response. He just kept crying, his entire body trembling. It broke my heart to see him like this, and the fear of not knowing was making me feel helpless. After what felt like a very long time, his sobs began to subside. I offered him a glass of water, my voice softer now. "Please, Zishan," I urged. "Tell me what's going on. Is your mother okay? Why have you come here like this all of a sudden? What happened?" I was overwhelmed with worry. My hands were trembling and my chest felt tight with the weight of all these unknowns. Finally, Zishan spoke. What he told me left me completely speechless. Had he not been crying with such genuine pain, I would have assumed he was joking. That's how unbelievable it was. Zishan had always been mischievous by nature. Even as a child, his sense of humor could be reckless. He often played pranks that were funny to him but caused distress to everyone else. I remembered how when I got married, he was just a playful 12-year-old boy, innocent and immature. But now, after 2 years, as he stood before me, I saw a tall adolescent boy who looked far more grown up than I remembered. His face looked unusually serious, making it even harder to believe he would joke about something like this. How could he joke about something so heavy? It must have been true, whatever he had told me. Yet, for reasons I couldn't explain, my mind still refused to fully accept it. There was a strange resistance inside me, as though I was hoping it wasn't real. He had told me that our mother-in-law had thrown him out of the house in a fit of rage, and now he was never going back. Ever. It sounded too outrageous to be true. This was the same woman who loved Zishan dearly. He was her youngest son, the apple of her eye. She had always pampered him more than anyone else. How could she possibly have thrown him out? What had changed? Through sniffles and quiet sobs, he explained that our eldest sister-in-law had been poisoning her mind against him, just as she used to do with me. He said she had twisted the story so badly that their mother didn't even listen to his side. Without giving him a chance to defend himself, she had lashed out at him and ordered him out of the house. That alone broke him, but what hurt him more was how quickly their mother believed the lies. As soon as he mentioned her, our eldest sister-in-law, I felt a familiar ache in my head. I instinctively held my temples as if the very memory of her was enough to cause pain. I had no idea why she was always ready to ruin the peace in everyone's lives. I wasn't even her blood relative, but she didn't spare her own brothers either. I felt a deep sadness for Zishan. I knew exactly what he was going through because I had once walked the same path. That woman had a toxic nature, always looking for a spark she could turn into a wildfire. It was because of her that I ended up living separately. In fact, if it were up to her, she would have ensured my husband, Owias, divorced me on the very first day of our marriage. She would have done it too. had I not used my sense and strength to take OYS and move out. If I had stayed, she would have made sure our marriage never survived. Elias had married me for love, and that very fact was a thorn in her eyes. She couldn't digest that her brother had married someone he chose himself, not someone she had picked. Even though she was already married, she insisted on living with us, constantly interfering in our lives. She made it her mission to remind everyone that her own husband didn't care for her while OS cherished me. She carried that bitterness like a badge. The truth was, her husband was lazy and irresponsible, unable to provide even for her basic needs, let alone her desires. OIS had been supporting them both financially. After our marriage, I simply couldn't accept that my husband should also carry the burden of his sister and her indifferent husband. While Ois worked tirelessly from morning to evening, her husband would sit at home all day doing nothing, living off others and, together with his wife, constantly poisoning our mother-in-law's mind against me. The result? Chaos and arguments became routine in our household. It was me who eventually convinced Ois that we needed to live separately, if only to make her husband realize his responsibilities and become a man worth something. We had moved out just 3 months after our marriage. Even after living separately, Ois continued to support his mother and younger brother financially. But still, my mother-in-law held a deep grudge against me. She believed the entire situation had been a carefully planned conspiracy on my part, that I had deliberately manipulated Ois to create distance between him and his family. And as for our eldest sister-in-law, she was fuming. Her frustration wasn't subtle. After all, her share of financial support had come to a halt. One day, she stormed into our home and created a huge scene. That day marked the end of everything. From that point forward, I never stepped foot in my in-laws' house again, nor did I maintain any connection with anyone from that side. Ois also made it clear to her, in no uncertain terms, that she would never be welcome in our home again. But breaking ties with her came at a price. My mother-in-law, who was once somewhat cordial with me, turned her back on me completely. As a result, she never allowed Zishan to visit us either. That's why today I was seeing Zishan for the first time in nearly 2 years, and the way he had arrived, walking out into the burning afternoon sun, visibly shaken, along with the reason he shared, filled me with both sympathy and disbelief. Sisters are supposed to protect their brothers, to love them unconditionally, but here was a sister who seemed intent on robbing her own brothers of peace, simply because her own life had failed to bring her happiness. Her husband had given her nothing, no joy, no comfort, and now she wanted to control the lives of those around her out of bitterness. I gently asked Zishan, "But what exactly happened that made Mother not even listen to you before throwing you out?" Zishan gave a faint, sad smile and replied, "Sister-in-law, didn't you also have to leave that house? Tell me, what crime had you committed?" "Still, she made your life miserable, didn't she?" His words stung with truth. "The same thing happened to me," he continued. "She and her husband have practically taken over our house. They don't want any of us to live there. She wants to claim it all, control everything. She wants me and Ois to become their servants while they live a luxurious life without lifting a finger." Hearing this, my eyes widened. I had never imagined such a motive behind her actions. I had always thought her constant interference was just part of her personality, controlling, manipulative, conflict-driven. But now, Zishan's words made me question everything. Was she really trying to take over the house? "She couldn't handle the fact that I reminded her it was our home too," Zishan added. "I simply told her that Ois and I had a right to that house, just as much as she did." That one sentence was enough to ignite her rage. She ran to Mother, twisted the story, and I was out on the street within hours. He looked at me, defeated. "I have nowhere to go. Please let me stay here. I promise I'll help around the house. I'll run errands, do whatever chores you need. I won't be a burden." I placed my hand gently on his shoulder and said, "There's nothing to worry about. You can stay here peacefully. When your brother comes home this evening, we'll talk to your mother together. After all, how could she throw you out of the house?" But Zishan quickly shook his head and replied, "No, there's no need to talk to her. Even if she calls me back now, I'm not going. I know she'll never let me live in peace. She'll wait for the first opportunity to humiliate me and throw me out again." Tears began to fall from his eyes once more, and I grew deeply concerned. It took great effort to calm him down. There was no extra room in the house, only my bedroom and a small, modest drawing room. So I said to him, You can rest on the couch in the drawing room. He quietly walked over and lay down on the couch, still crying softly. I didn't stop him. Maybe letting it out would ease his pain. Maybe he would feel lighter by evening and change his mind. But when Owais came home that evening and tried to reason with him, it was no use. Zeishan firmly refused to go back. He said if we didn't let him stay, he would rather sleep on the streets. Considering his fragile mental state, Owais made the decision that Zeishan would stay with us for now. Once he felt emotionally stable, Owais said, he would talk to their mother and try to find a resolution to the whole situation. His words were calm, thoughtful, even reassuring, but they didn't ease the knot forming in my chest. A wave of concern began rising within me. We didn't have a spare room. It was just a 2-room house, my bedroom and a small drawing room. More than that, we had only one bathroom, which was attached to my room. This meant that Zeishan too would have to come through my bedroom to use it. That made me uncomfortable, not because I doubted him, but simply because of the awkwardness of the arrangement. I tried, as gently as I could, to voice my concern to Owais. I chose my words carefully, not wanting to come across as selfish or harsh, but as soon as I finished, he gave me a look I couldn't quite decipher, part surprise, part disappointment. It's only for a few days, he said firmly. Please, just be patient. He's my only younger brother. You know the state he's in. If I ask him to leave now, who knows what he might do to himself? His tone was cold, distant, so unlike the warm Owais I knew. I sensed it would be pointless to press further, so I held my tongue and simply nodded, silently hoping that having Zeishan around wouldn't stir more trouble than we could handle. It had been so long since Owais and Zeishan had seen each other that I knew emotions were high. Owais was driven by guilt and affection. His heart stirred after reuniting with his brother. In such a state, he wasn't ready to see things logically, especially not from my perspective. The next day, Owais left for work and Zeishan stayed home. To my surprise, he wasn't idle. He went out to run errands, helped around the house, even brought back groceries. Normally, I had to do all that myself, but his help took a significant load off my shoulders. He kept calling me sister-in-law with so much warmth and repetition, it became almost comical. His constant cheerfulness made the atmosphere lighter. I found myself thinking, maybe I was wrong to worry. Maybe his presence here is actually a blessing. He seemed like the same young boy I had left behind years ago. He still had that innocent tone, that eagerness to please. Despite everything he had been through, he hadn't lost that part of himself. The first day passed peacefully. That evening, when Owais came home, he asked me if there had been any issues. I smiled and assured him there had been none. He looked visibly relieved. Tomorrow I'll go speak to Mother, he said. I need to understand how she could throw Zeishan out like that. Just then, Zeishan walked up to the door of our room, perhaps needing something. He had overheard Owais's words. His voice was soft, but firm as he interrupted. Brother, I already told you not to go. Please don't speak to Mother. In fact, there's no need for her to even know that I'm staying here. Zeishan became extremely emotional. Owais wrapped his arms around him in a comforting hug and promised, All right, don't worry, I won't tell Mother anything. Days began to pass, and before we knew it, a full week had gone by since Zeishan came to live with us. Everything seemed to be going smoothly. By the end of that first week, Owais had already bought Zeishan new course books and a fresh school uniform. He resumed his schooling, leaving each morning from our home as if nothing in his life had been interrupted. Things were settling into a routine again. One afternoon, however, Zeishan brought 4 of his school friends over. Our small house, already limited in space, became noisy and crowded. The living room echoed with laughter and conversation. But it was the middle of the day, my usual time for rest, and since Zeishan had moved in, I hadn't had a proper afternoon nap. That day, the noise was just too much. Once his friends left, I pulled Zeishan aside and spoke to him firmly. From now on, don't bring your friends here. They're all teenage boys. It's not appropriate. Keep them outside. It's better that way. He immediately lowered his head, visibly remorseful. Sister-in-law, he said quietly, I only brought them because I had missed several days of school. There was too much work piled up. They helped me finish an entire week's worth of assignments in just one sitting. I promise, none of them will come back again. His sincerity caught me off guard. A wave of guilt swept over me. I had scolded him without knowing the full picture. He had brought his friends purely out of necessity, not mischief. Internally, I began to worry. What if he thinks I don't want him here? What if he believes I'm unhappy with his presence? That thought disturbed me deeply, especially considering how helpful and respectful he had been since he arrived. He had never overstepped, and in fact, he had become an incredible support in my daily life. True to his word, none of his friends ever returned. He would leave for school every morning, return by noon, and spend the rest of his time either studying or helping me around the house. I found myself growing genuinely fond of him. It wasn't just affection, it was something maternal. I had no children of my own, even after 2 years of marriage, and Zishan's presence filled a void I had stopped acknowledging. I began caring for him the way a mother would, tending to his smallest needs, making sure his clothes were folded, his food was warm, his shoes polished. He felt completely at ease around me. He would come into my room without hesitation, sit and chat, laugh at silly things, help with chores. But whenever I mentioned his mother or sister, his expression would shift. The brightness in his face would fade, and he'd grow visibly tense, sometimes even upset. 3 full months had passed since Zaishan started living with us, and something had started to bother me deeply. Not once had my mother-in-law reached out. Not a single phone call, no message. It was as though she had erased him from her life. How could a mother be so indifferent? I often wondered. How could she not want to know where her son was? I brought it up with Owais. Has mother called recently? Has she said anything about Zishan? Owais said there had been no phone call from their mother. Even when I visited her, he explained, she didn't mention Zishan at all, and because of the promise I made to him, I didn't bring up his name either. It was truly shocking. How could a mother show no concern for her son, especially when that son was barely 14? It wasn't just neglectful, it was unnatural. Days continued to pass, and then Owais informed me that he had to leave for another city for work. His job often required him to travel every few months, usually for a week at a time. Normally, his departures would fill me with unease. I hated being alone in the house. It felt too quiet, too empty. But this time, I felt unexpectedly at ease. I smiled and told him, "Don't worry, I'm not alone anymore. Zishan is with me. He looks after me, helps with the housework, even runs errands so I don't have to go out. I'll manage just fine without you." And so Owais left, leaving Zishan and me alone for the week. At first, everything seemed fine. But within a day or two, I began to notice something different. Zishan's behavior shifted in subtle ways. I'd often catch him glancing at me from the corner of his eye when he thought I wasn't looking. At first, I brushed it off. He'd lived with us for 3 months without crossing any lines, without ever making me uncomfortable. But still, something about the way he watched me now was unsettling. Then, one night, well past midnight, I was startled when he entered my bedroom. His voice was low and nervous as he said, "Sister-in-law, I'm feeling scared. I keep hearing something like someone knocking on the drawing room door. Can I sleep here in your room tonight?" I didn't feel comfortable with the idea, but given the late hour, his trembling tone, and the fact that he seemed genuinely frightened, I agreed. "All right, but you'll sleep on the couch," I said firmly. He nodded and quietly lay down on the sofa. Despite his presence, I found it hard to fall asleep. Something about the whole situation didn't sit right with me. Eventually, exhaustion overcame me and I drifted off. But when I woke up, every hair on my body stood on end. I was tied to the bed. Zishan was nowhere to be seen. Panic rose in my chest as I began calling his name, my voice hoarse with fear. There was no response. My heart pounded as horrible thoughts began clouding my mind. Had he been right? Had someone broken into the house? He had said he heard knocking at the door last night. Was it real? My cries filled the room, but still, no sound from Zishan. I began to cry uncontrollably. My hands and feet were tightly bound, and I couldn't free myself. Each second felt like an eternity. My breathing became shallow, choked with fear. I was terrified, not just for myself, but for Zishan too. He was my responsibility. Owais had left him in my care, and now he was missing. Bound and helpless, my body was growing weaker by the minute. I struggled against the ropes, but they were tied too tightly. My breath came in short, panicked bursts until everything slowly faded into darkness. I passed out. When I regained consciousness, 5 hours had gone by. My limbs were sore and numb. Zishan was suddenly by my side, looking distraught. His face was pale, his eyes swollen from crying. He rushed to untie me, sobbing uncontrollably as he spoke. Sister-in-law, last night, some thieves broke in. They tied me up in the other room and gagged my mouth. I couldn't scream. They stole everything and left. I somehow managed to free myself and came as fast as I could. I was in shock. I clung to him and cried, unable to make sense of what had just happened. Nothing like this had ever occurred before. Our neighborhood was peaceful, and the house, though small, was secure. Every window had iron grills, every entry point was always locked. How had someone broken in? I called Owais immediately and told him everything. The house was a mess, rummaged through, overturned, looted. Owais, alarmed, instructed me to call the police right away. I did. They came and conducted a full inspection, but even they were puzzled. There's no clear point of entry, one officer said, unless the front door was left open. But I was sure, I knew I had locked the door myself from the inside. I remembered the click of the bolt. Still, how could I explain this? Several valuables were gone. My jewelry, our savings, anything worth money had vanished. My head was spinning. Somehow, word reached my mother-in-law. She showed up the next day, but not to offer sympathy or support. Instead, she immediately began blaming me. "You were the one responsible," she shouted, ignoring the chaos around her. And then, shockingly, she turned to Zishan, pulled him into her arms, and began to weep. "My son, I searched everywhere for you. Why were you hiding here like this? Come home now, come with me." I was stunned. She had never once contacted us about Zishan, not even a single inquiry over the last 3 months. So when had she suddenly begun searching? And if she truly cared, why was she ignoring what had happened to us? The break-in, the trauma? She wasn't here out of concern. She was here to pour salt into our wounds and to reclaim her son as if he were a lost possession. Without hesitation, she took Zishan with her, and to my shock, he went without protest. After months of insisting he'd never return, he left without even looking back. Owais returned the very next day, visibly shaken. He rushed through the house, checking everything. We had lost so much, but the thing that rattled him most wasn't the jewelry or the cash. It was a missing file. "There was a file," he said, pacing anxiously. "I left it right here. Where is it?" I shrugged, genuinely clueless. "I don't know. What file?" "It was the house file," Owais said grimly. "Before Father passed, he gave it to me with instructions to divide the property among us when the time was right. But I delayed because I knew my sister's intentions weren't pure. Zishan's still too young. If I had divided things then, she might have stolen his share. Maybe the thieves also took that file from the house." Owais went to the police station to find out what investigations the police had conducted, and then a truth came to light that shocked us. The very brother-in-law whom I had raised like a son turned out to be a snake in the sleeve. That night, after tying me up for 5 hours, he searched our house himself under the pretense of thieves, rummaging around secretly. When I fainted crying, he searched every part of my room and obtained the file he had come for. Father had sent him to our house with a well-planned scheme, and that is why Mother had not even tried to find him, because she knew where he was. Their actual goal was the file containing the house documents. Father's vile nature was revealed to us, but what surprised me was Zishan, who, despite knowing Father's truth, sided with him. Owais was deeply hurt by the fact that his siblings had deceived him this way. Owais himself told his mother that he no longer wanted any share in this house nor any relation with anyone. God had given us a lot. We didn't even need our share of this house, but Owais wanted to fulfill his father's will and properly divide the property among siblings at the right time. But maybe God had other plans. Nowadays, even siblings' blood has turned cold. Have you also witnessed such an incident with your own eyes?